During the years that followed the First World War, the Royal Navy faced a paradox. It had emerged victorious, yet the cost of victory left Britain financially strained. Shipyards were quiet, new construction slowed, and the Admiralty was forced to do more with less. But the ocean still had to be guarded. Trade routes remained lifelines, and the empire stretched across every sea. From this need came two unusual cruisers, HMS Emerald and HMS Enterprise. Laid down in 1918 and completed in the early 1920s, they were part of a world still adjusting to peace, yet uneasy with what the future might hold. Together they would span decades of naval service, from the twilight of the dreadnought age to the age of radar and aircraft carriers. At the time, the Royal Navy was experimenting with the new 6-inch BL Mk-12 gun. Unlike earlier designs, it offered improved range, a higher rate of fire, and the ability to use more modern ammunition. Emerald was fitted with 7 of these weapons in single shielded mounts, a conventional but effective layout that gave her strong broadside power. Her sister, Enterprise, was different. Instead of mounting only singles, she carried an experimental twin 6-inch turret forward, replacing 2 of the single mounts. This was a trial installation, the first time the Royal Navy had seriously attempted to mount twin 6-inch guns on a cruiser. If successful, it would influence the design of an entire generation of ships. And successful it was. The twin turret on Enterprise performed well, and its lessons were carried forward into the Leander, Arethusa, and Amphion classes of the 1930s. In this way, the two sisters were not just warships. They were test beds, shaping the future of Royal Navy cruiser design. When Emerald and Enterprise were commissioned in 1926, the war they had been designed for was already over. They entered a world dominated by treaties. The Washington Naval Treaty limited battleships and cruisers alike, forcing nations to build within strict rules. For Britain, the challenge was to maintain global commitments with a reduced fleet. The two ships saw service around the empire during the 1920s and 1930s. They patrolled distant waters, trained midshipmen, and represented British power abroad. Neither gained much glory in those quiet years. To many, they seemed odd ships, larger and faster than the older Danais, but not as heavily armed as the new treaty cruisers appearing in the 1930s. Still, they endured. They were reliable seaboats, and their speed made them valuable even as newer ships entered service. When war returned in 1939, both Emerald and Enterprise would prove their worth in ways no one had foreseen. Into the Second World War. At the outbreak of the Second World War, the Royal Navy faced immense pressure. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, surface raiders like the Graf Spee threatened shipping, and Italy and Japan loomed as potential adversaries. Every available ship was pressed into service, including the older Emerald and Enterprise. Emerald's first duties were convoy escort and patrol in the North Atlantic, unglamorous but vital work. In 1939 she joined the East Indies Station, where she hunted for German raiders threatening Indian Ocean shipping. Later she operated in the Mediterranean, where the threat of the Italian Navy kept every cruiser busy. Enterprise began her war on the home fleet roster, patrolling northern waters and guarding convoys to and from Britain. She saw service off Norway in 1940 during the German invasion, supporting Allied operations in the bitter Arctic climate. Both ships worked tirelessly through the early years of the war. They lacked the glamour of battleships or aircraft carriers, but they filled the endless demand for ships that could be everywhere at once, escorting, patrolling, standing guard. Enterprise's finest hour would come at the Bay of Biscay. December 28, 1943, the Bay of Biscay, off the coast of France. By now, Enterprise had been transferred to the Western Approaches Command. That winter, Allied intelligence reported that German blockade runners were attempting to slip from the Far East into occupied France, carrying vital supplies. The Royal Navy dispatched cruisers and destroyers to intercept. On that cold December day, Enterprise, accompanied by a flotilla of destroyers, clashed with a powerful German escort force, destroyers and torpedo boats determined to protect the blockade runners. The battle that followed was fierce. Enterprise used her radar to detect enemy ships through the storm and opened fire with her 6-inch guns. Shells splashed into the sea, striking and damaging German vessels. Despite being outnumbered, the British force pressed the attack. By the end of the day, the Germans were forced to retreat, their blockade runners doomed. Enterprise emerged battered but victorious. It was one of the last surface actions of the war in European waters, and her finest hour. While her sister was making headlines in the Bay of Biscay, Emerald continued her own steady service. She was present during the early stages of the war in the Indian Ocean, later serving in convoy escort duties across dangerous waters. In 1942 she joined the Eastern Fleet under Admiral Somerville, operating out of Ceylon. The Japanese threat loomed large after the fall of Singapore, and every ship was needed to defend the Indian Ocean lifeline. Though Emerald did not face the Japanese fleet directly, her presence added to the fragile strength of Britain's forces in that theater. Her war was less dramatic than Enterprise's, but no less important. Convoys were the arteries of empire, and without cruisers like Emerald standing watch, those arteries could have been cut. By 1944, both sisters were showing their age. Compared to sleek new cruisers like the Belfast or Edinburgh classes, the Emeralds looked tired, their machinery worn from years of hard service. Emerald saw limited use in the closing stages of the war, her speed diminished and her hull showing its years. Enterprise, however, continued to serve in northern waters until Germany's surrender in May 1945. Neither ship played a role in the Pacific War. By then, newer vessels and American strength dominated that theater. But both had given all that was asked of them in Europe, from convoy escort to surface battle. HMS Emerald was paid off in 1945 and scrapped shortly thereafter. HMS Enterprise lingered a little longer, but by 1946 she too was decommissioned and broken up. They had survived 2 eras of naval warfare, from the gunnery duels of the 1920s to the radar-guided battles of the 1940s. By carrying the first twin 6-inch turret on a British cruiser, Enterprise helped set the stage for the Royal Navy's interwar designs. Every cruiser that followed carried the lessons she taught. In wartime, both sisters proved that even ships born of compromise could still play vital roles. Emerald kept the convoy lanes open in distant seas. Enterprise fought and won one of the last cruiser battles of the Second World War. And together, they symbolized the adaptability of the Royal Navy, building from what it had, testing new ideas, and pressing every ship into service when duty called. And though their steel has long since been broken up, their story remains: 2 sisters, born in the shadow of one war, tested in the crucible of another, and remembered as quiet but steadfast guardians of the sea. From the gun decks to the bridge, every story we tell honors those who served. If this tale made you feel the salt and steel of history, give it a like, and if you're not yet part of our channel's Convoy, subscribe and join the ranks. More powerful stories await.